Now, I'm sure you're looking at this title like, what the hell does that even mean? After all, the expectation for when you're playing a bad game is to just stop playing that game, right? But what if I told you that even awful games have their merit? That's where The Surge sits for me. In this weird nebulous void that exists between a minor addiction and a poorly designed mess of a game. By the way, this video will contain spoilers on various boss fights, and my opinions on the ending, so if you're at all interested in this game and discovering it for yourself, you might want to click away right now. The Surge is an action RPG from the same studio that brought us Lords of the Fallen, a game that tried to imitate the Dark Souls formula but ended up being hated by most. Dark Souls is a hard name to live up to, and the formula it exists in isn't the easiest to pull off successfully, so I was somewhat surprised to hear that they made another one. It's great though that a studio would try again on a formula that they like. After all, clone or not, art inspires art, and a different studio will bring a fresh take on the formula. At least that's the idea. So it's awesome to see a studio continue to try to get it right. Anyway, once you begin the game proper, it's clear that The Surge borrows a lot from Dark Souls, and for the first few hours it feels pretty good. It's as familiar as it is new. The idea of targeting specific body parts to cut them off is both interesting and intuitive. As long as you do enough damage to a body part and that part contains armor, you'll get either a blueprint to build that piece of armor or otherwise the parts to upgrade that specific limb. It's a mechanic that doesn't get rid of grinding in and of itself, but what it does do is make the grinding predictable and measurable. You know what you need, how to get it, and what to get it from. This is perhaps the game's biggest strength and the most innovative thing that it does. The whole first zone is the game's honeymoon experience. You'll die, you'll learn, you'll get better, and in general, you'll have some fun. And then... should be up here.
Reboot in progress.
Oh god.
System check initiated.
Oh god.
Error. Bypassing. Error. Bypassing. Bypass successful.
The first boss is where the game's Dank Souls nature first rears its ugly head. This boss is a large bipedal robot that sometimes turns slowly and other times turns quick enough to one-shot you that I'd swear if it was a real-world physical object it would have shattered the sound barrier right then and there. You'll want to get in between his legs and keep attacking him, but watch out for the stomp attack with radius that's really hard to read. So you attack his legs and it doesn't take long until you start realizing that you're not actually damaging the boss. Instead, you're filling up an orange bar underneath the boss's health. This is the point where you start to make conclusions. First, once you fill up that orange bar, something's gonna happen. And second, this is just the way bosses work in this game, right? These are pretty logical conclusions. The first assumption is right, but maybe not in the way you thought. Perhaps what you thought was that once you fill up the orange, some armor would fall off and then now you can harm the boss or something. What actually happens is that the boss enters a new phase and jumps away from you. You panic a little bit, keeping your distance because you're not sure what to expect, and then you get shot with rockets, and you probably die. So you come back, get to that phase again, and make sure that you're not getting far enough for the boss to want to fire rockets. So you keep swinging and swinging and swinging, and the boss still doesn't take damage? Dummy, you're doing it wrong! Duh, you're supposed to let the boss fire its rockets and let one of the volleys curve into itself to knock it down. Duh! Now you can damage it! There's no reason to expect that this is the correct solution. I got lucky and just happened to stumble upon this. But I wouldn't blame anybody who just quits here, or thinks that the encounter is bugged, or had to look up the solution. It's not telegraphed, it doesn't make a ton of sense, and it goes completely against any amount of intuition that I, at least, have built up from The Surge and other Souls games I've played. But, whatever. You finish the boss, and you feel good. The first boss is dead, and you did a good job defeating it, and you move on. But remember this, boss. Remember it. We'll be coming back to it later. But for now, the first boss is dead, and it's time to move on to the next zone. And, well, this is where the game starts to break down a little bit more. This next zone comes with a pretty hefty difficulty spike, and I started dying a whole lot here. Something funny happens when you die, though. It gives you an opportunity to think about maybe what went wrong and how to do things better, so hopefully you can do something better next time and succeed. This is pretty expected, and the idea is pretty central to the Dark Souls formula and experience. Die, learn, improve, repeat. It's a gameplay loop that feels satisfying on every iteration of the loop. The sense of improvement when you overcome that challenge that killed you previously is an addicting sort of high that makes it easy to come back. But you don't just learn enemy patterns and the layout of the level when you die. You start to really understand how your own player character's mechanics work. Stamina usage, dodge distance, block timings, weapon combos, and oh my god, the weapon combos! I can deal with scorpion bots with more air control than a housefly, and powerful, untelegraphed attacks. I can deal with the lack of animation canceling as a form of forcing thoughtful engagement. I can deal with the haphazard enemy placement, enemies that are difficult to stagger, and weapons that seem to be completely unbalanced with respect of the time that you get them. I think I can even deal with all of these put together, if not for one of the most infuriating things that the developers of this game thought would be wise to include. In many cases, pressing R1 or R2 for a horizontal or vertical attack will result in 2 swings from the player character. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but in a game where you can't cancel and where you need to make meaningful decisions on when to attack and when to disengage, this means a lot. The first attack, wide horizontal swing. Second attack, quick elbow attack followed by an incredibly slow vertical chop. Why? Why? Why would you ever do this? If animation canceling isn't going to be a thing, please don't make a single press of a button result in 2 swings. This mechanic makes the combat break down in an extremely noticeable way. The further you get into the game, the more difficult it becomes to stagger an enemy. If you can't stagger an enemy, it'll hit you if you're in the middle of your own combo. You can't escape this combo of yours, so the smartest and safest thing to do is gonna just be quick attacks over and over again. It's a dash attack or a jump attack for damage, and then you get out immediately. At least until you begin to learn how many hits it takes to stagger a specific enemy. It ends up being a really boring way to approach an enemy with armor you don't recognize. And since nearly every enemy is some form of human, that style of play gets really boring really quickly. So, needless to say, I didn't do the smart thing. I tried my best to have fun in the way that I like to have fun with games. Be versatile. Learn combos, approach enemies differently, chop off parts on almost every encounter. So I died a lot. And while a lot of it was my fault, I'll admit, I can't help but feel like a significant portion of the blame goes to this unintuitive weapon combo system. The weapons have concrete combos, sure, but the attack speeds in those combos follow no real logical progression. There's no quick attack or strong attack, it's just horizontal attack or vertical attack. So until you intimately learn the combos of every single button combination, you're never going to have any idea whether the next attack is going to have a very long windup and put you in danger, or be a weak and quick swing that will let you escape quickly. It's not a good system. But regardless of all that salt, I couldn't put the game down. I honestly don't know if it was just a competitive stubbornness that kept me from quitting, or a genuine sense of enjoyment. I like hard games. And like I mentioned earlier, the feeling of improvement and conquering a challenge is something that I find very engaging. It just so happens that the surge difficulty doesn't just lie in its enemies and their power, but in the clunkiness of the mechanics themselves. Now, don't misunderstand me, I'm not trying to defend these bad systems or make excuses for them, I'm just trying to provide a reason why I enjoyed this clunky-ass game that's so flawed. I wasn't just fighting the enemies, I was fighting the game itself and my own ability to improve, react, and adapt. It's a formula that I usually shy away from, but the Surge's strong first impressions and my craving for a Souls-like game at the time meant that I got stuck in the game, unable to stop until I was done. And for a while, through all the salt of the scorpion bots and finding myself dead before I could react many times, I slowly progressed and conquered the enemies and challenges in front of me. Until I reached a boss called the Black Cerberus. You and me, brother.
Lay down your weapons and come peacefully. Or don't. It's just the same to me.
This guy is a humanoid enemy much like most of the enemies in the game. He's got a huge axe, incredibly wide and large swinging arcs, long combos, and an insane amount of stagger resistance such that you're probably not going to knock him out of his combos. I'll admit that many of my deaths to this guy came from my stubborn refusal to not play with the combo system and attempt to stagger him. Some part of me just refused to accept the hit once and get out style of play that I found so boring and unengaging. But I will say that once I learned his combos and that I couldn't stagger him, I switched to this style and managed to beat this boss with relative ease. but not without a lot of salt along the way as he killed me over and over and over again while I tried to use the game's combos. My mistake for trying to use the game's mechanics, I guess. But that's not all. That's not a huge deal in and of itself. Perhaps that's just the gimmick of this boss. Why not? I can deal with that. But remember the boss from earlier, the giant bipedal robot piece of crap that with the weird turn radius and the unintuitive way of knocking him down? Yeah, it's back for the Black Cerberus fight. This is where I lost any respect I had left for this game. After you deal about a quarter of the health bar in damage to the Black Cerberus, he stuns you and retreats into his office and summons a stronger version of the Pax robot you fought at the beginning of the game. What's he doing? What are you doing? What? Is this a PAX? You know, this by itself, it's interesting. It's an interesting twist on a boss fight. It's unexpected and it's interesting, and by itself I have no problem with the idea, but this fight is where the game's completely unintuitive nonsense reaches the absolute height of insanity. This boss within the boss isn't just a copy of the first boss. Its health has been beefed up, it hits a lot harder, and it's just as fast as it ever was. It still has that stupid orange bar mechanic too. So how do we kill this boss? Go ahead, see if you can remember what you learned from the first boss and make a guess. It's a reasonable guess given that this is just a stronger version of the same thing you fought at the beginning of the game. So you fill up the boss's orange bar and let it create some distance between it and you so that it can fire missiles and you... Wait, you die? Do your little rockets. Do your rockets. Alright, that's not the rockets that I was hoping for? Wait, that's not what happened before. That's not the missile barrage that you can manipulate to make the robot knock itself down. It's been replaced with the really fast and straight-firing rocket launcher that's difficult to dodge. Okay, fine. Whatever. You respawn, you run back, you get through the first phase of the boss, and the PAX robot comes out again, and you fill the orange bar, and... Wait a minute, how do you knock it down now if you can't use the missiles? The game just took away the only way you knew how to knock it down, so you continue to attack the legs, dodge attacks, heal yourself as you get hit, and maybe eventually the boss will fall down when you hit it. Turns out that if you attack the leg that's on the ground while the boss is doing a stomp attack, it'll fall. Keep in mind, this same mechanic works for the first boss, but oh my god, how are we supposed to know this? It's not intuitive. And with how slow and sluggish a lot of the weapons are in this game, it's hard to connect the information when the boss finally falls down, and it's hard to target the leg in the first place when you finally do get an opportunity and know what's going on. It's so dumb. But you know what? You're a stubborn idiot, and you continue to fight and bring in this new information, and finally you defeat this PAX bot and die to the Black Cerberus' new phase. No big deal. Just keep trying again and again and keep getting better and doing better. You know, typical Dark Souls fare. So you do that. You improve, and you realize that the Black Cerberus is healing while it's in its office, which is frustrating, but whatever. But a while into its second phase, Wait, no. Not again. This is happening again? Wait, hold on. Cool. It's gotta be summoning the second boss of the game now. No, it's just another pack spot. Alright, come at me. Oh, okay. You're getting a little... Okay, oh jeez. Alright, now what? Now what do you got? Another one? Are you serious? You have to kill the entirety of this boss yet again, while the boss is healing in his office. A wrong step or a bad dodge or an unlucky shift as you take a full second and a half to swing could easily spell your demise with this stupid robot. So even though you know its patterns and you know how to defeat it now, it's not a fight that carries zero risk. More salt, more death, and then I just gave up and looked up some tips online. I was at my limit. The boss keeps healing and keeps summoning these robots that destroy me. But guess what? If you make these robots destroy these big red things in the two corners of the room with their big ol' rockets, the boss will never summon another PAX robot. This is the dumbest... How are you even supposed to know this? How are you supposed to know how to knock down the robot? Why is it completely invulnerable to attacks in the leg no matter how many times you hit it? Why does the boss even have the ability to summon multiple of these stupid things after I keep destroying them? And why does he heal while you fight it? This fight is the absolute pinnacle of the game's poorly thought out mess of mechanics. Everything comes together into a perfect storm of jank. After I finally beat this boss, I continue to have some difficulties through the rest of the game, but nothing that even came close to the nonsense that the Black Cerberus had to offer. Even that boss wasn't enough to make me put the game down. Though something did come really close, one of the strongest basic enemies of the game has a special way to kill it that was never associated with any enemy ever in the game since I started it. So needless to say, I sat there just beating on this guy for about 10 minutes before I realized that I'm not getting anywhere and I should look online. Turns out, you have to do this like door opening mechanic to kill the creature. It doesn't make any sense! It doesn't make any sense! Wait, what? Excuse me. Why wasn't I given this prompt on the other one? What? 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 The Surge is not a good game. It's got a great first impression, interesting ideas, but relatively poorly thought out mechanics, and a story that tries too hard to be like Dark Souls with an ending that invalidates the whole game. Just because that's what Dark Souls does. It's not a good game, but it manages to be fun regardless. If that doesn't make sense to you, I don't blame you. It doesn't make sense to me either. I should have quit. I should have put it down and played something less frustrating, but I continued to challenge myself and take on the game. I couldn't let myself be defeated by Dank Souls, but I doubt I would have gotten very far if the game's first impression wasn't as incredibly strong as it is. The story makes little sense from the beginning, but you're eased into the game, and the unique limb chopping mechanic keeps you intrigued through the first zone. So that's why the Surge simultaneously succeeds and fails. Deck 13 pulled off something weird here. They learned a lot from the failure of Lords of the Fallen and improved in a formula that's hard to succeed in. The Surge has gotten mixed reception, with some people loving the game and some hating it. I, of course, sit somewhere here in the middle, nursing my wounds that had salt rubbed deep into them. Regardless of how I and many others feel, Deck 13 is absolutely improving at what they do, and this formula and all the interesting new mechanics and strong first impressions show that the studio does indeed have some talent behind it. So I'm intrigued to see what they'll come up with in the future, but if they could improve this much since Lords of the Fallen, I'm actually pretty excited to see what their next game can bring to the table if they stay in this formula. Just please, no more Black Cerberus nonsense! Anyway, I got a lot more heated reading this script than I initially anticipated when I was writing it. It's just, it all came bubbling back up. So, what about you? Have you played The Surge? What do you think of these mechanics? Am I just complaining too much, or do these mechanics and situations as I've explained them make no coherent sense to you? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks so much to my producer and above-level patrons, Mig the Best and Vati Plays. If you liked or disliked the video, you know what to do. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ingeniousclown and hit that subscribe button for more awesome gaming content here in the future, and I will see you next time.